And a very good morning. I hope we're live. I think we're live. Technical issues are plenty this morning. I think Matt Dunn's struggling with his microphone. So when it comes to it, Matt, you better make sure it's worthwhile, all that technical engineering to make it work. Every word counts, Matt. Every word counts. And I'm also joined by Jeremy Cross, Chief Sports Writer at the Daily Star. Great to have you with us, Jezza. Andy Dunn, Chief Sports Writer at the Daily Mirror. And Matt Dunn, well, football aficionado at the Daily Express. Delighted that you can join us for this week's Football Digest show. A pleasure to have you on board. And let's hope it's much more pleasurable than the experience I had, actually, sitting near Matt Dunn. So that made it entertaining. Last night at Selhurst Park. And Man United, at their latest goalless draw. I have to say, it probably puts a different context on Man United's season. Yes, they're still sitting pretty in second place in the Premier League, but it's now 14 points behind Manchester City. 4 hours and 45 minutes. I got my calculator out last night. Since they last scored a goal, 3 goalless draws in a row. Matt, you were there. Let's start with you. What did that tell us last night? What has this week told us about Manchester United and where they are in terms of under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, where their progress is, where they're going?
Well, I'll tell you what it told me last night is they may have been wearing barcodes up and down their shirts and shorts, but if there's a trades description act, people describing them as title challenges a few weeks ago will have a few questions to answer. They're clearly miles away from where they need to be, from where Man City are at the moment, and with no money available in the summer, which is the soundings coming out this week, that they're going to remain miles away. It was tepid. It was poor. Rashford was off his game. It wasn't that he wasn't trying. It just seemed bereft of any ideas or inspiration. It's one of those where the ball was running under his foot and going out to touch, and simple overlap passes for Luke Shaw were just going over the goal line. It was that kind of night, and there was no one else there taking up the mantle for United, and it was so 0-0. You know, like you say, 4 hours and 45 minutes. I'll tell you what, though, they'll take 0-0 on Sunday.
Yes, very good point, because it is the Manchester derby, isn't it? I mean, it's just what a huge game that is. And we talk about the sort of kind of mind the gap, if you like, between City and United right now. And it's, well, I mean, let's see what the reality is then, Jeremy. I mean, I do think that sort of kind of that might be a very revealing game at the Etihad, don't you think?
Yeah, well, it'll be first v second, and the gap. I mean, it's hard to believe that United are the second best team in the country, really. I mean, I've seen a lot of United this season. I mean, they were top of the league. When was it? November, towards the end of November. January,
no,
yeah.
Someone told me
was it January?
Point in January. Listen, that might be a play on kind of, things in hand and what have you, and briefly, but it was as recent as Jan. Amazing.
So yeah, they are like Matt says, they are light years behind City, who are I think we'll come on to them later, but who are an exceptional team. So, there's no shame in sort of trailing in the dust of City. I mean, everyone's doing that this season, but for a club the size of Man United, they should be measuring themselves against City. They should be winning titles. They've not won a title since 2013. And it's amazing. I don't know if you can remember, but back then, that was Fergie's last year, and they were how they won the title that year, I don't know, because they were a very mediocre side. So, United, they need strengthening in the summer. They need a top class centre back, I think, with pace. I don't think they've got enough pace in their defence, especially in the middle. And they need probably 2 world-class midfielders. I mean, the likes of Matic and Fred and McTominay aren't gonna boss Gay at the biggest games of the season. They're not good enough in that. I mean, they're decent players, but they're not title-winning midfielders that you need if you want to win the big prizes. So they've got a lot of ground to make up on City, and the problem you've got is ultimately that, I think we've said this before on previous shows, that City are probably going to dominate for the foreseeable now. So. It's a big challenge. They're treading water, essentially. I think that's the good way to describe them at the minute.
Yeah, Andy. It was Rashford's 44th game of the season for club and country last night. I mean, we all love Marcus Rashford, not just for what he does on the pitch, but off it. But I have to say, there was a moment in the second half when Harry Maguire balled him out for failing to run back and get himself onside. And it just struck me in that moment, he's too knackered to run back.
Yeah.
You know, I know we sort of almost feel like I'm making excuses for, the nation's favourite footballing son, of which I'm definitely, one of the founder members. But they're really lacking up top, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, a few things on that, John. I mean, it's great this season. I mean, in the unique circumstances, we're being treated to the wit and wisdom of Harry Maguire, it seems, in most games, isn't it? He had a few choice words to, I think it was Jonathan Moss in one game I watched, and him being one of the loudest, he tends to make, people seem to be fascinated, don't they, by what these footballers are saying. Of course, what they're saying isn't any level above what you'll hear down on the park on a Sunday morning. Him urging Rashford to not run onside or to run back from being offside, and apparently Marcus replying in fairly blunt terms, so it's.
I didn't hear that bit. I mean,
I didn't hear that bit either. According today to some reports, of course, he replied to him calling him something head, and I always thought his name was Slabhead, but I don't know whether I didn't realise.
I didn't realise that Marcus knew how to swear.
Well, no, me neither. I didn't know, as we all know, Harry Maguire's called Slabhead. I didn't realise that Slabhead began with a K, but it clearly does. Anyway, we digress. But yeah, listen, Rashford. I mean, I don't really buy into the tired stuff personally. I mean, I saw that statistic that he's played 41 games for his club, isn't it? I think 44 if you include the England appearances.
Which I do. And
yes, he may be a little bit fatigued. I'm not sure, but what I do know is Marcus Rashford, on the balance of his form over the last dozen or so games, and sporadically he's been good in those games. But I think on the balance of his form, he's been slightly disappointing. And I think United fans will tell you that they don't think at the moment that Solskjaer is getting the best out of his attacking options. And I think that's a really big thing for Solskjaer at the moment. I genuinely think that he's in a situation now where, last night, as soon as you put social media on after the game, it was, the hashtag Ole Out was there again. And it is literally in, out, in, out, in, out. But I think we all assume that he's got... He's had the confidence, the votes of confidence. He's had the confidence of the board. But I do think now if he was to let slip a top 4 position with 11 Premier League games to go, and the standard of this particular, take away Manchester City and the rest are much of a muchness, if he was to let that slip, then I think that would be fatal for his job. I really do. There's no way they can not have Champions League next year. It looked a formality not long ago. Well, you mentioned about not longer where they were. Well, I'll tell you, 10 games ago, after 17 games, they were 7 points clear of Manchester City after 17 games. I mean, City had played 2 games less, but they were 7 points behind. Since then, of course, City have won every game. United haven't. And in a 10-game spin around, they're now 14 points behind, haven't been 7 points ahead. So that's how dramatic it's been. And I honestly think that, Solskjaer, I think he's probably got a lot of goodwill from us, from United fans, from players. He comes across, I think, really well. I think he's an honest, likeable guy. I think his team's played some decent stuff this year. But I do think that if you've got a selection of attacking talent that includes Greenwood, Martial, Rashford, Cavani, and if you throw sort of Fernandes into that mix, then you should be getting better. You should be doing better than going, 445 minutes without a league goal. And I really do think the pressure is now on him for these remaining 11 games, assuming they don't win on Sunday. They had to, isn't they? Might well do. I mean, we were probably there when they won that famous game when they came back from 2-0 down to win that game. You can't see that sort of performance now out of them, but they might do. Their away record is very good. But then he would have 10 games left, and I do think it's it is going to be a crucial end to the season for Solskjaer. And then you start looking at other aspects of the team, the switching ground of De Gea and Henderson. What does that say about his management skills, his decisiveness? That maybe hasn't been played too well this season. We then start looking at Van der Beek and wondering what on earth this has all been about. Surely a guy who is one of the most promising young talents in Europe, and he's basically being sidelined at United, having only just joined. So I do think that we're looking at a situation now where these last couple of months of the season are absolutely crucial for Solskjaer. If he doesn't finish top four, I still think they'll probably will sneak top four, but if he doesn't finish top four in this...
You see, it's interesting you say sneak, Andy, because, they're second, and
they are second.
It shouldn't be about sneaking it, should it?
No, it shouldn't, but they do have, I mean, at the moment, they're 50 points from 27 games. It just shows you really what the standard below City is. A little bit disappointing this season. 50 points from 27 games, that works out just under 2 points a game. You're probably looking at an average that will give you about 70 points for the season, which is okay. But, it's not world beating. And the fact of the matter is that you would expect, and obviously tonight's game, Chelsea at Liverpool will be crucial, but you would expect Chelsea to, have a decent end to the season. You wouldn't expect Liverpool to carry on, now that they've probably got a bit of confidence back after that win at Bramall Lane on Sunday. The only thing I would say is that then of the other interlopers, so to speak, Leicester and Villa have been showing signs of weakness. I mean, clearly Leicester have squad issues. And can Tottenham go on the sort of run that can get them in there? Can Everton maintain something? I don't know. I think United will just hang on, but at the moment, John, their form just isn't good enough.
No,
and attacking form is poor.
When you think about it, we're talking about United finishing second, and probably a lot of people at the club would consider that to be a satisfying season. Well, that's. I mean, you're talking about Man United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, being happy with finishing second place in the league. It's just not good enough.
How do they address that? Because the biggest thing for me is a centre forward. I mean, it even made a difference. I didn't think Cavani played particularly well last night, but actually what he gave them in comparison to Sunday at Chelsea was be a focal point and movement. And even though they didn't finish, it gave them attacking options, and they were far more dangerous going forward, even though obviously they didn't score. But it just struck me as they're absolutely crying out for centre forward.
Yeah, look, Cavani is a short-term fix, isn't he? He'll probably stay again next season and be a cameo player. And I like him. He's been remarkable, Nick, fitness-wise for his age.
Yeah.
He's well into his 30s now, and he will score goals, but he's not the long-term solution. And when you look around, it's so difficult, isn't it, finding a striker who can win you trophies, who can score you 35 goals in a season. And I suppose the one everyone's talking about is Haaland, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's close to Solskjaer. They know each other well. They've kept in touch with each other. He was asked about him the other week, and he didn't rule out going for him. So we all wrote stories on the back of that. But if you're Haaland, you could probably this summer be able to choose whichever club you want to go to. And a colleague of ours, Dave McDonald, did a good piece with Andy Cole in the week, where Cole was saying that are United as an attractive option as they used to be, and they're not. So would he? If you had a choice going to Man United or Man City, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? If you're Haaland, you'd go to City.
No, sure. But Matt, how do you see the Manchester derby playing out this weekend? Because it does feel like, I mean, every Manchester derby is big now. They've always been such rivals, but it feels like a bit of a barometer, really, as to where we are. Because we reach a point, don't we, that if they go 17 clear, then that's really embarrassing, isn't it, for the rest?
Yeah, it's embarrassing, but I don't know what anyone at Manchester United is going to do about it. I mean, they were so far off it yesterday that you can just see City just waiting their time. If they were strong defensive, if they, 3 back-to-back clean sheets, Ole pointed out yesterday, which I don't think quite caught the mood. But, if that was based on some great defending, you'd say, well, perhaps they might nick one and whatever. But there's nothing about that defence that says that City aren't going to rip them to shreds on Sunday. I think it's going to be a turkey shoot, to be honest. And, City could run out 2 or 3, 4 even against United at the moment with the form they're in. United have shown they're powerless to do anything to come back at that. And that's what could be embarrassing is the manner of the defeat, not the 17 points, because they've been 17 points off the title for the last couple of years. It's the... it'll be the manner of such a heavy defeat against a team that's supposed to be challenging.
No, I totally agree. Let's look at Man City in the shake-up of that. And it says here in this excellent running order put forward by Jeremy that we're running out of superlatives. We certainly are. 21 straight wins, 28 games unbeaten, and 15 or 14 points clear now. Are they the greatest team English football has ever seen? Could make a song out of that. Bookies have started paying out already. Now, where are they in the pantheon of great English teams or teams that English football has seen in the last few years, guys?
Well, sorry,
go on, Jez.
No, I was just look. It was funny because I said that on the running order because we were at the game on Tuesday night, and towards the end when they ran out comfortable winners in the end, scoring 3 goals in the last 10 minutes. But we were just looking at each other in the press box, saying to each other, "What is the left to right about City in terms of how good they are?" You know, we'd literally run out of brilliant things to say about how sensational they've been. Well, I don't know. It's a debate that can go on forever, isn't it? Who is the greatest side? I mean, you could argue Arsenal, the Invincibles who never lost a game. That's one hell of an achievement. The United side in '99 that won the treble. I mean, we'll find out, won't we, in the next few weeks, simply because they're still on for the quadruple. It's not out of the question that they could do it. And if they do it, obviously it ends the debate once and for all. But I was leaving the game actually with a colleague, and we were discussing the fact that if they end up maybe with just 2 trophies this season, I mean, they've got 1 already, haven't they? And they're going to win the league, obviously. But you'd probably think, what a disappointing season it's been. You know, they've only won 2 trophies, and that's the measure of how good they are, really. You know, most teams are killed for winning 2 trophies in one season. But if they don't win at least 3 this season, I think it'll be a bit of an anticlimax. So, you know, we'll find out how good they are. What's so funny?
No, just think is like, you know, if they don't win at least 3, it'll be a bit of an anti. I totally get where you're coming from, but what does that say about the rest? The rest is amazing. It is amazing.
But they're unstoppable.
They are that good, aren't they?
They're unstoppable. They can make 5 or 6 changes every game, and they're not weakened. We've said this before. They have such a massive squad of wonderful players, and that's been the difference this season. They've been lucky with injuries. I know they've not had too many serious injuries, unlike their rivals. So, you know, that's played a part. But yeah, they're a supreme side, probably the best side in Europe at the minute. But you know, they have got to win the Champions League. That is the ultimate test of a team, winning the Champions League. And this is a wonderful chance for them to do it this season. If they don't do it, it'll be another crushing blow.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to win something clearly. You know, you can't even begin to even talk about them as being amongst the greatest ever teams. You know, when they haven't made it yet this season, obviously they're going to win the league, and you would have them as favourites to beat. Andy, you'd have a favourite to beat City. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just going to say, when you say that, you mean they're a different team now, don't you, from the back-to-back teams, you know, of a couple of years ago. It's a different generation, isn't it? You know, sort of thing, really, just to qualify.
Absolutely, it's a changed team. You know, it's an evolving team. It's a team essentially without Aguero, although, you know, he did play on Saturday, the game I was at, looked miles off the pace. You know, it's a game without Aguero, without Silva, without company. Yes, the team's evolved. There's no doubt about that. And, of course, you've had that hiatus where they were comprehensively second best to Liverpool last season. So, you know, this is a different team to that extent. And obviously they need to win some. They will win the league. You would back them to beat Spurs in the Carabao Cup final. And then, you know, see what happens in the FA Cup and obviously the Champions League. You know, they can't be classed as one of the greatest ever teams without winning the European Cup. So that's that. And also maybe to be devil's advocate just a little bit, you know, rather than a huge City loving. The more I look at it now at the moment, the Premier League, the more I'm looking at teams going to Manchester City or facing Manchester City and basically just giving up the game before they start. You know, I mean, that sounds harsh, and I probably don't exactly mean giving it up, but basically talking or looking in terms, going out there and maybe going a goal down, and then not even then sort of attempting to get back into the game or being more adventurous until late on. It's that basically it's Manchester City versus most weeks. It is Manchester City versus a damage limitation 11 is what's being sent out there to face them. I don't think that can't afford to be. Solskjaer can't afford for that to be the case on Sunday. He's got to go there and win for obvious matters. United, a huge club and huge local rivals. The same when Liverpool play City. But I do get the impression that literally City are facing teams now, and they are presented with a challenge of beating a team that actually isn't there to try and beat them. Essentially, it would be nice if they did beat them. It would be nice if they nicked a goal on the break. Like West Ham probably had a couple of chances. They might have nicked something on Saturday. It would be nice if they nicked a goal on the break. It would be nice if they scored a couple of goals with only 20% of possession. It would be nice if they nicked one from a set piece like Wolves did. But essentially, they're facing City now thinking, you know what? We have much more winnable, meaningful challenges ahead of us. We're not going to win the league. So, leave them be as they are, City. Let's just get out of this game with hopefully not many injuries, hopefully not getting tonked 8-0. And I think that does put a different complexion on the whole thing. And that's the way, I think it's an unusual season in that sense. I think that's always happened, but I think it's happening more so now. Having said all that, and of course, the other caveat, as Jeremy's referred to, is they've got an incredible squad. And while you look around most other squads, well, quite a few other squads, I wouldn't say most, players are suffering, a lot of injuries. City, apart from, obviously, Aguero is returning from injury, De Bruyne had a bit of a layoff, and obviously Nathan Ake, who most people have forgotten actually signed for them in the first place. It's like, they've been really fortunate with injuries. And again, that might not just be fortune, because they've got such a big cast. They're making 5, 6, 7 changes a game. Players are being kept fresh. They're being kept fit. So, that's you've got to pay tribute to them for that. And also then the good thing from Guardiola is that he somehow motivates these players just incredibly. Like guys who are being rotated come in and absolutely, their pressing game, their commitment is just second to none. And I wasn't there, but I'm sure Jeremy saw it against.
What was interesting
is that they're still flying at teams like late on the 3-1 up.
What was interesting on Tuesday was Wolves basically couldn't get out of their own half in the first half, and it was 1-0, an own goal granted, but you thought you can start writing your match report now.
Yeah,
it's half time, but there's no way this result is going to be anything other than City win.
Yeah.
So there we were, and then the world sort of turned on its axis because Wolves somehow managed a goal from Cody's first in 3 years.
Yeah.
And it actually, going back to what Dunny said about teams lying down and dying when they go there, Wolves had a good spell then after it gave them belief that they could get something and even win it. And they had a couple of chances. Traore missed a chance and Neto missed a chance. And you thought, crikey, they could win this, Wolves.
Yes.
And then City just flicked. It was like a switch was being flicked. They just went mad and scored 3 times in about 10 minutes to win the game, 4-1 in the end. And it was it was a bit flattering at the scoreline at the end. For all intents and purposes, it looked like it was going to finish 1-1. But it's like Wolves had basically equalised and poked a line with a big stick and angered City. And they just turned it on again. And that was the scary thing. They rattled in 3 goals just in a flash, really. But Dunny's right. Wolves were an example to other teams where you've got to be show more ambition when you play City. Obviously, you don't want to get done 5, 6, 7-0.
That's the dilemma, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the dilemma.
Yeah.
Goal difference for teams can be very important come the end of the season. But you've got to be more dynamic with the ball when you get it.
Yeah.
I mean, Wolves, when they got the ball, they just lost it straight away. You've got to come up with a plan of posing a threat when you have the ball, because you're not going to have it much, so you've got to make the most of it when you do have it. It's very difficult, granted, and But what was alarming as well for other teams was the one Guardiola was asked about in the build-up to the game the day before. He was asked about, how do you maintain this piece, the strength of mind, the ambition in the players, because they're just reeling off win after win. And he basically said, well, as soon as I see someone whose standards have dropped, they're out of the team. It was like, if you've been managed by a manager who's so obsessed with, winning game after game after game, it's quite alarming for the rest of the pack, basically.
Yeah, it really is. No,
He set that up though, didn't he? When he chased for those 100 points after they clearly won the title a couple of seasons ago. That was no one was allowed to let up then. And the fact is, it's really easy to drop a player if you feel that he's not quite doing it when you've got someone to replace him, which is a luxury no other managers have. So, it's great.
You need targets, Matt, though, don't you? You really do need targets. I mean, the best
thing, when they won the league in the middle of or beginning of April, he kept them going right to the final whistle to chase those points and everything, and got lots that mentality into the players then. And so now, when he needed it to accelerate away over Christmas, they already had that mentality. It's no good winning a game; you've got to win the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And like Jeremy said, swap out the players who aren't quite doing it, but that's great if you've got the backup there ready to slot in. Which
sorry, go on, Matt.
Yeah, so which most managers don't have.
What would you normally class as a really good winning run? 6, 7, 8 games for a team? Oh, they've won 8 games on the trot. That's a great run. They've won 21 straight games. I mean, it's hard to compute it, isn't it, really? I find
it really is. It's a great shout, that, because, early in the season, we were talking, weren't we, about no one's put this was fairly... Yeah, 4-game winning run, because the unique nature of this crazy, unprecedented season meant, so we were told, that no one could be consistent. No one was going to win it by a streak. No one was going to kind of dominate, because everyone was going to get injured and get fatigued and face all these sort of mental, issues as well about, feeling mentally drained because of the unique nature and pressure of the season. And yet, let's be honest, Man City have embarrassed the rest. I mean, Liverpool have had their own, particular issues, mostly at centre half, and some of that has to come down to sheer bad luck. Although then you have to question why they left themselves so short last summer, and there's particular issues. So there's no great, Man United, or again, you can argue, as we have been doing, a work in progress. But I just think that Man City, and this doesn't deride their achievement at all, are embarrassing the rest, aren't they? That's the point, I think. They're leaving the rest shamed, frankly. But just finally, anyone want to take this? Liverpool at their best last season before lockdown, when they were sweeping all before them, no one could stop them. They were winning every single week against this Manchester City machine, this current Manchester City machine. Who wins?
That's a good one. Well, probably Liverpool, I would have thought. If you've got... the one thing I do think about Manchester City is their defence, quite rightly, has won a lot of accolades, acclaim this season for what they've done. And absolutely no problem with that at all. But I do think it's a combination of they're not being as tested as severely as they have been in the past. Has this defence suddenly become, with the addition of Ruben Dias, a world-beating defence, or basically have they not got much to do? And, I would think that it's a combination of them both. So if you've got Mane, Firmino and Salah firing on all cylinders and sweeping teams aside, as they did against Manchester City, as they have done against Manchester City, and as they did to most teams, then that was an incredibly thrilling team at its peak. Then, it's a great game. And personally, I would back Liverpool in that game. But I mean, it's a tough imaginary game to play.
Yeah, no. The full Anfield makes a difference as well, Crossy.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
City have been intimidated at Anfield down the years, and obviously it was no coincidence that they won there a few weeks ago comfortably, but it was an empty Anfield, and we've all been there on noisy days and nights, and it makes such a difference.
It really does. No, it's a very good point. Just before we finish this section now, we always welcome your questions, and there's a few good ones this morning. One about Arsenal, about Leicester, which we'll come on to. But Gary Wally asks, basically, just a final thought on Man United about Van der Beek. Shouldn't he play more? I mean, I do find it bizarre that basically it's a strange one, isn't it? Because Van der Beek was one of the outstanding players of that wonderful Ajax team. He's clearly an incredibly talented player. Isn't it a manager's responsibility to make a huge multi-million-pound asset work?
Yeah. Now, look, there are stories, or there were stories doing the rounds at United when they signed him, that he wasn't Solskjaer's signing, that it was that Woodward wanted to sign him more than Ollie did. And that would make sense when you've seen what's happened over the last 6 months, because This is a player who was, like you say, was instrumental in that wonderful Ajax side that's now been dismantled because all the players have gone elsewhere. But, you know, we saw him play for Holland. If that player is good enough to get in the Holland midfield, then why is he not good enough to play for Man United? Because let's be honest, that midfield that United have. Remember, Pogba's been injured for the last few weeks. He's not even got to get in front of Pogba. Pogba's created space in that midfield for someone to come in. McTominay, like we mentioned before, we've got McTominay, Fred, Matic in that midfield. If they are all better options than Van der Beek, then it's baffling to me. Baffling.
Yeah, and it does scream of what Jeremy just said. It does scream of him not being Solskjaer's, signing, of him not fancying him. I mean, Van der Beek, listen, strange enough, we probably haven't, because his opportunities have been that limited, we probably haven't seen enough of him on a consistent basis to make a judgment of whether or not, he's a United player of the future or whether he can be a crucial player for them going forward. I don't know. He might be better in big games than Bruno Fernandes.
It's embarrassing, isn't it?
I mean, half being flippant there, by the way. But
I do know what you mean.
But those people who do say that maybe in big games Bruno Fernandes, doesn't quite make the impact that he should, let's put it that way, well, they're getting more and more... grist to their mill, aren't they?
Yeah, although I'm sure that Roy Hodgson will be flattered that you think Crystal Palace is such a big game. And I have to say, I say that with no sarcasm, simply because
I was only referring to the Chelsea game more than the Palace game, to be honest with you. But there you
go. But I just, I do know what you mean. Although I have to say, I'm going to use this opportunity to write a continual love letter to Roy Hodgson, who I think does a remarkable job at Crystal Palace.
He's got lockdown hair. He needs his haircut in lockdown.
He does. But I just think I can't talk. What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen with Roy Hodgson at the end of the season. But I half think now, will he go? And if he goes, then I really, then I really think we should. Sort of kind of give him the send-off that he deserves, because he and Steve Parish have made Crystal Palace a really strong Premier League team, a solid outfit, a solid football club. And I think sometimes that goes under the radar when they occasionally flirt during the season with a bit of a relegation scrap, but they never get sucked in. They won't go down. And I think Crystal Palace have long been established. And I think, frankly, I think people would do well to remember Carlton and Alan Kirbishley. But anyway, there you go. That's my rant over. We've got some lovely messages. We must say Annie Horton there saying, great to hear you all, Miss Sunday Supplement too. But Annie, you're always welcome on here. So let's move on, guys. And a very interesting point this week has been a lot of talk again about referees. I mean, listen, it was thrown into new light, wasn't it? Again, about the after the Hudson-Odoi alleged handball at Stamford Bridge. I was surprised, frankly, that Luke Shaw, didn't get charged by the FA. I have to say, I was very surprised at that. I think referees would be disappointed, but I think it was deemed as a second-hand conversation. There's been talk this week about sort of, should referees be mic'd up so we can hear, from a broadcast sense, so we can hear a word they say. I spoke to a few referees this week actually on something, and they're adamant and insistent that basically the top level standards have never been better. I don't know where you all stand on that. It's an IFAB meeting tomorrow where the sort of latest instalment on the handball comes up again. What do we think, guys, with referees? Are we? I mean, Lee Mason last weekend at the Hawthorns, although the media didn't cover itself in glory when the co-com and it didn't seem to know that basically you couldn't re-hit the ball if you basically if you hit the woodwork with it, which wasn't a great look. What do we think, referees? Are we making too much of this? Should we be able to question, without fear of them, getting some stick over it on social media? Well, I mean, it all seems a bit swirling mess, Jeremy, doesn't it? Or Matt, sorry.
I was going to come in there. I think the problem with referees, and it's always been a problem, is we don't get to hear from them between the games. All we ever get to see them is when they've made a big blunder and we're under scrutiny. We don't see them in between. We don't see them managing games really well. We don't get to see positive refereeing as much as we should, and we don't get to meet the people who are making these decisions. So they become pantomime villains. Yeah, they're two-dimensional characters. Actually, I mean, you say you've been speaking to referees this week. If you do speak to referees and have that honour, because it does feel like trying to get in touch with royalty sometimes because they're hidden behind so many layers of protection. They're really, I've always found them really impressive people who have got to the top of their profession because they're really good at handling people on the park, handling Sunday league footballers, handling lower league footballers, managing situations when they've not got 15 cameras on them, actually getting a decision on the park that everyone's happy with so that everyone has a good game of football. And you move on, and that's their history of their involvement in the game. And then they suddenly get to the Premier League, and all you see is these VAR scrutinised decisions, which are minuscule decisions. The assistant referees in particular, some of their offside calls, no one says, actually, do you know what? 95% of those are right, it seems. Really, some of those silly crosshair decisions, actually, the assistants are calling those right as often as not. That's how good they are. And I think the problem we get is if they do involve themselves in any sort of banter, like it seems to have happened with Luke Shaw, you can imagine it's a throwaway sort of comment that the referee may have made. Well, that's him being human and actually understanding what's going on in the game and what the game's about. He seemed to go across to the monitor on that incident, determined to say, right, I'm just going to have a quick look and see if I've dropped one. And if I have, we'll sort it out. If I haven't, I'm not going to change my decision. He didn't seem to be interested in scrutinising a technical detail of whether, his little pinky got to the ball first or whatever. It was one of those. Have I made a glaring error? No, I can't see anything there that screams penalty at me. Let's carry on. And if that's the message that referees are getting this week, then perhaps we should know that and perhaps understand why referees are doing. I think miking up referee. I think referees mic'd up in rugby helps everybody. I can't, see anything. I know there's going to be issues, as we've alluded to before, with Harry Maguire and Marcus Rashford having to mind their P's and Q's a little bit more. But I think it helps everyone understand why decisions are being made. And actually, you can say, well, no, actually, you've got a point. And if you hear that live, the reasoning that's gone into a decision, it helps you see it in the way that it's being seen on the pitch as it happens in the context of the game. And it's just the fact that all we get is these figures paraded in front of us every week and chosen to rule on your team that don't have any sort of personality that we know of and are just there to be booed and hissed at. And I think the Premier League don't do themselves any favour on that. And that skittles down then to the guy who turns up to the Sunday League game, who again you don't know, but you understand him to be this guy that can be, knocked as a figure of fun and just criticised willy-nilly as some sort of two-dimensional cartoon character. And as soon as we start seeing them as human beings, I think the better.
The thing is,
it's interesting. I saw Jeremy. I saw you nodding away in agreement there about kind of the miking up there. It's an interesting. My worry about that is just to play devil's advocate, and that is that basically we only want to hear referees after they've made a mistake, and it would again almost like be putting them in the stocks and throwing rotten fruit at them, sort of thing. Really, it's almost to catch them out. Or do you see it as a positive?
Well, we've got to a point now where referees are very well paid. They make decisions that can change games, affect clubs deeply, because, you get towards the end of a season and you see decisions that can cost a club relegation. So, they are integral to the game on a Saturday and a Sunday or midweek as the players are. So, well, like it or not, they've put themselves in that position. And if you see something happen like with Lee Mason or Atwell at Stamford Bridge last weekend, why are they allowed to go on field, referee a game, and then just disappear for another week? Why are they not being made to explain, not apologise, but just explain how they reach a specific decision? What was interesting to me was earlier this week, where we're changing sports now, but there was a French referee called, I've written his name down, Pascal Gasquez, who refereed the England-Wales game in the Six Nations at Cardiff on last Saturday. And he made a couple of pretty big mistakes in that game, and Wales won the game comfortably in the end. And he came out a couple of days later and basically said, "I'll hold my hands up. I got those. I've looked back at what happened, and I've got those decisions wrong." And I thought, fair play to you, mate. You know, you've come out and faced the music, and we never hear from these referees. They basically hide behind a wall of silence, and I don't think it's right because there's such an important factor in a game. This should be made to explain how they reach decisions.
Yeah, he gains respect from that, doesn't he, Andy? From speaking out, from being honest. The French
really,
referee, doesn't he?
No, I couldn't disagree more with the lads. I could not disagree more. Why on earth should they have to explain themselves? As long as they make their decision honestly. Jeremy says they're well paid. Listen, they're getting about $2,000 a week. If they're integral to the game, they're getting $2,000 a week as opposed to $200,000 a week or whatever. These guys aren't particularly well paid for all the pressure they're under. And why should they explain it? What do you want? You basically just want them there up on a coconut shy so you can throw more stones at them. It's absolutely ludicrous. They make honest decisions. No one needs to explain to me why that Hudson-Odoi, handball wasn't given. It wasn't given because he didn't think it was handball. That's it. Move on. Great. That's it. Neither side.
But it was handball. It was a penalty.
I didn't think it was handball. I wouldn't have given it.
No, I didn't think it was. I've got to be honest, I didn't think it was.
So it's up to the referee. The referee didn't think it was. I didn't think it was. John Cross didn't think it was. You did. Matt Dunn might have done.
No,
and that's it. So you need one guy to make a decision. He makes a decision. It's an honest decision. Listen, as long as the referees aren't crooked, then that'll do for me. They make an honest decision. He made an honest decision. Said, listen, that's my decision. Crack on, lads. Neither of those teams deserved any more than the point they got. Both those teams saved up a fairly miserable game of football. That's the issue. The referee wasn't the issue. The referee, it's become an industry. It's become an industry where, I watched the game, you were at Jeremy the other night, and they're on about VAR giving Laporte offside. Well, the linesman gave him offside. I mean, it was as simple as that, and he's offside. The linesman gives him offside. Just move on. Unfortunately, and listen, we're as much to blame as anyone. This farcical industry of just, what's the ref, the minutiae of whether the ref got it right. The idea, why is he going to explain? Apart from, I didn't think that was handball.
Andy,
that's it. What you and Dunny wants them just to come out. I don't know. We need some character profile of these referees.
Andy, can I just explain? I don't want them to come out afterwards. I want them to be mic'd up. In your distinguished playing career, were the good referees the ones that talked to the players, or the ones that didn't talk, or the ones that just whistled?
The ones who just gave the right decisions.
But explained what decision they.
Well, why do you need explaining? Do you not know why anyone makes a decision? Have you ever needed a decision explained to you why it was and why it wasn't?
Well, yeah, we had one last week.
Sometimes you say
the thing is with the rugby analogy, and I get why people go on about the rugby analogy. However, the rules are slightly more technical, and bear in mind that rugby are also probably trying to explain the rules to people who maybe don't know the minutiae of the rules. And listen, we've probably got rugby fans amongst us, and if you're sat at a game, are you telling me you can look at rugby and say, can you spot someone who's offside in rugby? No, I get that. Yeah. Or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, they need explaining. In football, the beauty of football is the rules are startlingly simple. You don't need the rules. If you need a rule explaining to you, then you're not a football fan. Simple as that. What rule would you like me to explain to you, Matt?
No, it's this, for instance. I'll tell you what, the challenge that is of both feet off the ground, where one he gets the ball, but from a distance in front of the ball, and one where he then catches it. Those don't know. You sometimes see those given as robust challenges. You sometimes see them as yellow cards. And I want to know from a referee. I don't think he was going in with reckless false. So it's play on, no reckless false. I've seen the situation. I acknowledge the fact that there is a different call to be made, but the call I'm making is this one, and you carry on. That's all the information you need.
So let's say referee in one game is mic'd up as you want him to be, and he says, right, play on, no reckless force, and then a similar challenge takes place in another game. The referee's mic'd up, and he says, right, that's a foul, reckless force. What would you say? Fair enough, that's okay. You still see the same always say, and say, how come he didn't give it and he did? And all you've got for your trouble is the beauty of Mike Dean's voice in your living room. Why on earth do you want Mike Dean's voice in your living room? I just don't know. But I just with refereeing a football match.
I just feel that having more information that the players get around, the ball ricocheted back. Defensive throw, ball hit both players at the same time. You know, that's one of the rules that you
You're
give.
watching
You're
it,
not
you can
making
see
a
it 20
judgment
times.
of-
Make up your own mind whether it did that or not. All you need to know is referees aren't bent. That's all you need to know. And it's as simple as that. You know, these are guys who know the rules. Clearly, although he clearly sort of got it wrong, Lee Mason in the first instance, he knew the rules on penalties like some people didn't. It's these guys know the rules. They imply the rules honestly, and they might get it wrong. I don't know. Probably stats show they get it wrong, I don't know, 1% of the time. And yet we're all bleating and saying they should come out in a hair share, flog themselves in front of us,
No, I
do
don't think
detention or whatever. I'm guilty, mea culpa. I mean, what do you want them to do? Come on national television, weep a little tear, have a bag of shares and say, I'm sorry, that should have been handball. I made a mistake. I mean, what do you expect them to do after the game? You did,
yes, Andy.
Come on, I'm guilty. Why don't you
Andy,
drag
I
them?
absolutely love your passion. I love it. But let me ask you
I'll
this.
tell you what,
Where were the
just down the
standards,
road
Andy?
here, right? Just down the road here, just along there, there's a street called Pillory Street, and they still have, it's called a Pillory Street because they've still got the stocks there, mate. Let's get them down there.
I actually agree with you. The reason we want referee interviews is because of that nature, and that is my fear. And that is my fear also about their miking up being broadcast, because I do think we have a different attitude to referees, although that was slightly exposed. Last week in the rugby. But let me ask you this, Andy, because I actually love your passion. I love your views on referees. Where are the standards? Where are we now with standards? Because I don't think they're as good as say, the last generation, which was Housey, which was Webb, which was Clattenburg. I don't think we're as good now.
Of course,
where do we stand?
Of course they are. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, remember, Clive Thomas, one of the great referees, giving goals, when that corner was taken, whatever. I mean, Peter Willis sending off Kevin Moran, when Peter Reid was 40 yards from goal, in that cup final. Listen, I don't forget, this was a time when, do you remember the good old days when referees had other jobs? We always, Peter Willis wasn't just a referee; he was a copper, as you would expect. David Ellery wasn't just a referee; he was a teacher at math school. He wasn't. Oh, no, okay, same horse, different jockey.
Peter Walton used to work at Specsavers.
But they all had different jobs. But of course, the standards are good. I mean, the reason why we probably don't think standards are good is because they are probably under way more scrutiny than they've ever been under, particularly with VAR. Just quickly though, on the, half joking apart on the mic'd up fronts, there was. Do you remember listening to the guy who's now a referee here in the EFL, isn't he? And he got mic'd up in Australia in the A-League.
Yeah, I didn't hear.
What's his name? Jared or someone? Was it Jared or? I'm sure he's a referee now in the EFL.
Australia, they trialed it quite.
And they had one game where they trialed it, and I think his name's. I know what, it just escapes me. Someone will look it up, but I think his name's Jared. And I know he came over here to referee in the EFL, and it actually, joking apart, it's actually worked quite well.
Well,
do you know what? I touched on that this week with the referees chat. Really, it was just that basically. Do you remember the David Ellery one, Millwall Arsenal, when basically Ellery was mic'd up and Tony Adams gave him an absolute, volleyful of abuse, which was a classic, wasn't it? And now it was funny to hear actually that I heard Perry Groves talking about that, sort of saying, it's a little bit unfair because we didn't actually know that he was mic'd up. And I think it was Perry Groves anyway. Forgive me, Perry, if it wasn't, but I think it was. And then basically, sort of, and I was just kind of laughing about it because it's just like, well, you would have toned it down if you'd known people were listening, and that would have made it. I don't know whether they would change their attitude. I suspect they probably would on occasion, but not always because you're wrapped up in the moment.
Did you see Stephen Gerrard get sent off last night?
Yeah.
And there he goes up to the referee, pretty much, and then says you were bang out of order, but swears during the time he says you're bang out of order and is sent off. And that really is the stuff that I think you've got to stop more than asking referees to come and explain themselves. Managers going onto the pitch confronting referees, no matter how high emotions are running, mind you. I mean, Rangers are about 120 points clear at the top of the league, aren't they? And he's still going on at half time saying you're bang out of order. So, and I think that's the sort of thing that needs to be stamped out. But
yeah. Let's move on, guys, because it was interesting this week. This week has thrown up more discussion about the Euros, hasn't it? And also England's 2030 World Cup bid. Blimey, what, you know, a government in supposed crisis. What do they need? Sort of tub thumping World Cup bid. So I don't know. What do we think, guys? Do the Euros still take place across 12 countries? I mean, obviously, you know, the FA and UEFA have been quick to, you know, have denied in over the last few weeks, haven't they? Let alone this week, about sort of kind of it being staged in England. But I mean, can it really be staged? Bearing in mind we've kind of got the controversy over club players being released this month for World Cup qualifiers. Klopp says already that Liverpool won't. Is it realistic to have the Euros across 12 countries?
Well, I spoke to UEFA this week, actually, and I had a long conversation with someone who works for them, and their view seems to be, and I think Matt mentioned this the other week, with the 12 different countries, it gives them a bit of flexibility in terms of should the virus have a spike in one particular place, then they can maybe move those games to a different country, as opposed to picking one country, for example, England, where you are basically putting all your eggs in one basket. So I suppose logically that makes sense, and no one can predict how this virus is going to go in the next few months. Thankfully, the numbers are coming down, but, you know, new variants seem to be appearing every week. So I think they just want to give themselves some flexibility in terms of should circumstances go against them during the tournament. So I think they seem adamant that the 12 different nations is still on the table, and that's where we are. So they're making a decision as late as possible at the end of April, apparently, and we'll know by then. So it's a logistical nightmare, isn't it, for UEFA? Whatever they do will be criticised, that's for sure. We just have to hope that they do give the tournament the best possible chance of being a good one, with or without supporters. I mean, it's very unlikely we're going to get masses of supporters there. It may be that the guy who I spoke to at UEFA said it may be that the only fans that are allowed to go to games are the local fans in that particular place, which obviously makes sense. So, you know, you would get a percentage of supporters inside stadiums. So, you know, I think it'll go ahead. It'll be very different. And they can't lose the tournament because it's so valuable financially to the smaller associations around Europe. So they rely on it for finance. So, and it's their flagship competition. So it will go ahead. It'll just be very different.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. And World Cup 2030, pie in the sky, Matt?
I just think that we're gonna have 5 host nations all guaranteed a place in the finals, because that's just seems ludicrous. You know, it weakened the tournament when we had 2 hosts in the past, because you know, it sort of unbalances the whole thing. And my fear is the only way they'll account for that and allow us to have all the home nations and islands in at the finals is to suddenly have a 40-team World Cup final. And you're just thinking, oh my goodness, where's this going now? What is the point? You know, it's going to last all summer. There'll be so many meaningless games that I just don't see how that works. And for all the reasons that none of us particularly like, a Euro spread over lots of different. Yeah, we can't all say that it's wrong for a major tournament to be spread over 12 tournaments, 12 countries, but it's right for effectively 5 federations to host it. It's a shame, because it would be great for us, but I just don't see how it's great for football. You know, it'd be a fantastic party, but I just think some of the devil there's so much devil in the details that I don't think football will benefit.
No, and it's not as if we're popular, you know, unpopular worldwide or anything like that, you know, for our sheer English arrogance, you know. But there you go. But guys, go on. I just want to kind of you know, introduce a couple of listener questions actually, which I referred to sort of earlier on. Really, one interesting one here from Ethan Henson. Have Leicester got a strong and deep enough squad to make the top 4? Which is a pressing issue, bearing in mind just Leicester's travails of late. Who wants to take this?
Probably Probably not, I think. But, you know, they're obviously missing, they've missed Maddison, and now Barnes has unfortunately got a serious injury. So, you know, they drew last night with Burnley, which probably shows you how much they miss those two players. So, no, they probably haven't got they don't have the strength in depth, but the teams around them are all dropping points as well. So they may well end up in the top four. I mean, they had a great chance last year, didn't they? And it was so poor after lockdown. They barely won a game and got lost to Man United in the final game of the season. So they finished in the Europa League. But that's a big one for Rodgers, because, you know, they faltered last season despite promising so much. So it's a big deal. They need to get their injured players back as soon as possible.
Of course.
Leicester City scored 5 past Manchester City this season at the Etihad. I mean, that's all you need to know. I mean, that is how remarkable City's run has been. That we actually forget that Leicester went there and put 5 past City. I mean, it's incredible. But you know what?
We were
all
all saying then that Pep's lost it.
Well, it was 5-2, but you know that was one of the great, one of the most remarkable, one of the most slightly bizarre counter-attacking results. And to me, I totally agree. I mean, they've been really, really cursed with injuries, so I really feel sorry for them. And in answer to the question, I don't think the squad is quite deep enough for that to sustain the amount of injuries that they've had. But what I would also say is that they are, you know, they're a good team to watch. But in the main, although I suspect last night this would have been flipped around because they would have been the ones with possession. But you know, they are quite a counter-attacking side. I mean, you know, the game that was held up as an example of a lot of Liverpool's ills recently was the game that they lost at Leicester, you know, quite recently. But, you know, for most of that game, I could see nothing but a Liverpool winning that game. You know, Liverpool were by far the better side in that game up until Leicester hit them, you know, with those breakaway goals, you know, aided by some Liverpool mistakes. So I do think, for example, a result like the one against Arsenal probably was not entirely unexpected. I think they are. I'm not saying they're one-dimensional, but the dimension of the counter-attack with Vardy up top is important to them. And if a few cogs in that machine, like Maddison or Barnes, and you know, are out of that counter-attacking strength, then they've got an issue. And in simple answer to each question is they're probably not strong enough in depth to sustain a challenge amidst the type of injuries that they've got at the moment.
Do you want to answer the Arsenal question, Crossy?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, I know how much Matt loves Arsenal, so I was going to ask one from Kyle. Basically, can Arsenal make the top 4? So,
well, you know,
what do you think, Matt? You know, your affection for the Emirates.
You know, well, Arteta's one of the 3 best managers in the world, isn't he? So they're bound to finish in the top 4. No, I don't think they'll be anywhere near the top 4. I think they're too flaky.
Europe.
Well, yeah. I mean, given that City, given all the FA Cup and Carabao Cup places are going to be taken. So it might drop down as far as 7th. Then perhaps they'll squeak in, but they're not strong candidates. He doesn't know who his team is. I'd still think he's a long way away from having a strong enough squad to carry the name Arsenal. You just think of where they are now. Some of the players, they've got some good players, but they've got some players that just don't seem to be gelling right. The midfield's still not strong enough. And defensively, they can be good, they can be bad. He's having to play with a 3 to compensate, which restricts him further forward. It's just messy, and sometimes they can be so badly off it. You just think they're just throwing away points on what seems to be a tolerated experiment while Arteta sorts out what his world-beating team is. But it just feels a bit of a mess at the moment.
Crossy, do you think
if you wish you'd never asked?
Crossy, do you think if they don't get into the Europa League next season, that could be a good thing?
No, I don't. I don't like that theory. I think that it's not been since 95, 96 since Arsenal been outside of Europe. I don't think it's one of my pet hates is that basically, yes, I can see the benefits, please don't get me wrong, of not having the fixtures. But I think it's ridiculous and patronising and inappropriate for English clubs not to take the Europa League more seriously. And that's what we're talking about, isn't it? I mean, soon we're going to have the European Conference League, you know. So it's, you know, Arsenal's, you know, fall from grace is frankly in the last few years has been quite spectacular. Mind you, punctuated by FA Cups. And believe me, a lot of clubs would wish for that. So I'm not deriding the achievement, particularly not from Arteta last season. But I do think that basically from a financial perspective and also, you know, their standing in European football, I think it would be a huge miss if they miss out on Europe. I think they will. I don't think they'll make it, if I'm brutally honest. But I still think that, you know, Arteta deserves time and patience. I'm not sure that all Arsenal managers get that or have got that. And I think that sometimes that could be a bit unrealistic. Arsenal, mid-table. Arsenal. It's just unthinkable. And that's the bit that I don't get, you know. And I have to say, it's probably, everyone wants fans back. Of course they do. And, you know, Arteta has spoken about this in the past, about sort of saying, oh, it's you know, really want the fans and their energy. We miss them. But the other thing about that is that basically when they're, you know, there's been certain home defeats this season when frankly the fans would have been in an uproar. Make no mistake about it. He was under the cosh before Christmas. He would have been under the cosh a lot more if fans had been in. Arsenal cannot be in mid-table. I think Arteta does a good job.
Mid-table's about right for that side, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't just. You are where you are, aren't you? That's where they deserve to be. You know,
but best of the week surely was Mikel Arteta distancing himself from the Barcelona job. I'd just like to announce that I am now distancing myself from a Pulitzer Prize. Okay, chaps? Reports linking of me with the Pulitzer Prize for literature are untrue. So, I mean, it's like, it's great.
I'm having that for my column, doesn't it?
I think there's a prospective Barcelona presidential candidate who, frankly, spends far too much time on.
But it's just great to hear Miguel saying, "No, listen, don't worry, don't worry, Gunners. I'm Arsenal manager today and tomorrow. I'm not going to Barcelona."
Oh dear, I know it honestly did make me laugh so much so that he said that on a press conference I was on. I have to say, I didn't bother writing it because how can you write that? Come on, be serious.
Exactly.
But anyway,
it was headline news.
It's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. But anyway, there you go. So, listen, guys, I'm going to finish on in honour of Ian St. John, who, you know, a Liverpool great. Frankly, for someone of my generation, and let's put it this way, I have been invited for my first jab. I grew up basically idolising Saint and Greavesy. So just to honour Ian St. John's passing this week and the great man that he was, I just wanted to finish on our usual and final funny end slot with retro TV shows, guys. What was your favourite and why? Come on, who wants to go first?
My favourite, I always remember as a kid, was Run Around.
Yes.
With Mike Reid.
Mike Reid, yes.
It was just the voice, you know, and he went, "Run around now." And it sort of, his voice was booming out.
We were talking football.
Everyone.
Football, yeah.
Oh, right. Saint and Gravesy. Run Around was pretty good, though, wasn't it? It involved running.
Noel Edmonds swap shot when they had Frank Stapleton on. I remember that'll work.
I'll tell you what,
Ricky Davis.
Sorry, Jamie, I love you.
Cup final morning. Just moving swiftly back to football. Cup final morning when it was a proper. Speaking of cup final swap shop, you'd have cup final question of sport. The full build up, the coaches arriving when that used to be taken seriously. On the day of the FA Cup final, that's fond memories of theirs. Meeting the teams in the hotels beforehand, the big build up. That was always a big favourite for once a year. But no, I'm very much the Saint and Greavesy era. The only one that come close to it when it first started, I think, was when Fantasy Football.
Skinner.
And talked about football as well as just being silly. So those first few seasons of that were fantastic as well.
Footballers on Football. Well, I mean, loads of retro memories. I mean, first of all, I mean, St. John, by the way, Ian St. John, an absolute. I mean, you talk about. I mean, people do talk about. His partnership with Greavesy, fantastic. But I think everyone's reiterated that to a certain generation of Liverpool fans, the guy was an absolute one of the founding fathers of their success. Scored arguably. My dad is of that generation and a big Liverpool fan, and he will still describe the 1965 winner in the cup final in extra time against Leeds as the greatest goal in Liverpool history, the most significant goal in Liverpool history. It was the first time they'd won the FA Cup, and that was important then. When they weren't playing kids' teams and whatever. So I think that's important. But he that sort of irreverence that he had with St. John. A lot of programs from that era. Do you? I mean, what I remember football players on going on Superstars. Remember Kevin Keegan on Superstars?
Kevin Keegan,
and it was just great. Can you imagine them? But can you imagine? He was playing then. Can you imagine football teams allowing their players to go and do Superstars now? Yeah. To go on a bike and go and crash a bike, to go and do squat thrusts and more.
Bro, we squat thrust with Brian Jacks.
Oh, he won it every year.
Brian Jacks' squat thrusts are amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I mean, these were sportsmen in their prime going on a TV show and crashing
a brilliant clip. There was a brilliant clip that someone posted of Kevin Keegan.
They're not allowed to eat their own food.
No, about 3 days before a European Cup final, there he was on Superstar. On a bike, trying to sort of on a sort of running track, athletics track, trying to sort of beat the bike, and he fell off. Oh, it's just amazing.
Does anyone remember the name of that? Does anyone remember? I'm racking my brain to think of a show that involved journalists in the quiz show. The journalist.
I can see why it was brief.
Oh, what was it called? I think Mick Dennis was one of the hosts. Anyway, I'm determined to remember what that was. But no, other things non-football related, as in sports, though. Indoor league, right up Jezza Street, that one.
Oh yeah.
With Fred Truman.
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
And that was indoor sports, so it was bar skittles, arm wrestling, wine drinking,
absolutely brilliant. Let's game a pool. Brilliant. There's a great clip actually. I'm doing the rounds on Twitter of that, and Fred Truman is absolutely hilarious to watch.
Oh, fantastic! Can you retweet that, please?
Kicker tie and massive.
Please retweet that later, please.
I'll dig it out.
We'll love that. We'll find that. We'll find that. Maybe we should include Bullseye. Be amazing as a sport. That'd be fantastic. But my favourite St. and Greavesy memories were just Donald Trump doing the Rumbelows Cup draw.
Yeah.
I mean, from Trump Towers, if you remember that. How on earth did they pull that off to get the future president of the United States to do the Rumbelows Cup draw? Astonishing. But then they're almost trumping that. See what I did there. It was basically midway through a TV dispute in the 80s when you had no live football or no highlights from the old First Division. St and Greavesy went on a walk through London, taking Frank McAvenny, West Ham's new sign from St Mirren, who was currently top goal scorer in the First Division, walked him around London to say to people, anyone recognise who this fellow is? Basically, because football wasn't on. And it was such an amazing stunt. Can you imagine them being able to do the same now with Sergio Aguero or whoever it might be? It was a brilliant stunt. It was absolute genius. But it shows you, just how times change. I just thought that was those two incidents just epitomise St. Greavesy magic.
I remember when remember that news item on Granada News when they were just going around the streets of Liverpool asking if anyone of a certain age remembered a certain game. It might have been the 65 final.
Oh, yes, I do remember this.
And then they asked this bloke, who obviously looked to be of a certain age, and said, do you remember, this game? What are your memories of this game? Whatever. He said, memories. I played in it. I was in goal. It was Tommy Lawrence. Remember? The Flying Pig. It was just unbelievable.
Oh, fantastic. Have you seen the recent one where they ask someone in the street and, it's about Ipswich Town, isn't it? It's about and they pull an Ipswich player and they sort of say, "Oh, what do you?" This young Kieran Dyer.
Oh, right.
It's a young Kieran Dyer, and they basically pull him across in the street and say, "Well, what do you make of Ipswich? And what do you do?" And I'm a player, actually. It's amazing.
They should show some reruns of them, shouldn't they? Really?
It's great clips. Anyway, guys. Fantastic! It was great entertainment.
That Sunday Supplement was a good show. Do you ever remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was a bit of a throwback,
one, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely. What a good show that
was.
The
croissants they used to
eat. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if someone like to lay on the croissants, we'll be happily sponsored by some croissants. Yes. But there you go, guys. Been brilliant fun. Thanks so much. We never used to have this much fun on the Sunday Supplement, but there you go. Anyway, but I really appreciate you joining it, and thanks so much also for watching and for your questions. We'll take more next week, and we'll be back same time, same place next week. Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, guys. Andy, love your passion. Your passion always. Take care. All right. Cheers.